I'd like to call the Board of Trustees together for Columbus Day School, Columbus Charter School, and Douglas Academy for our board meeting on Thursday, October the 24th. Would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, Bob?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a quick matter of housekeeping. This meeting is being recorded. Would everybody please power off their cell phones? I thank everybody for doing that. Should any trustee have a conflict of interest regarding any items before them on today's agenda, please notify the chair at this time. Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the 9/26 and 10/18 meetings.
I so move.
We have a motion, and I need a second. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We have a preliminary EOG test results that is going to be presented by Mr. Mitchell of RBA. Mitchell, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Steve. As you all know, for years, both schools have turned in records of schools of distinction and high growth on the EOGs. Last year, they changed the testing completely to encompass the Common Core state standards. And that's the reason scores are so late coming out. They had to realign all their norms and that sort of thing. And these are preliminary scores. Can't give you any specific numbers because they're still subject to change. But basically, we beat the stuffing out of the state average in both schools. We met 100% of all of our goals. The CDS had 33 state goals and 25 federal goals. We met every one of them. Columbus Charter School had 27 state goals and 21 federal goals, and we met all of those. Regarding the percentage of all tests passed in reading, math, and science compared to the statewide results, both schools were considerably higher than the statewide average. Another thing that we're moving to, the state is finally moving to, we've done it for a number of years, but it's to keep track of growth of a student, say from 3rd grade to 4th grade, and track that for each teacher. The state is now starting to do that, and at Columbus Charter we had 13 teachers teaching 22 individual subjects, and these are in grades 4 through 7. 15 of them met expected growth, and 7 exceeded expected growth. At Charter Day, we had 20 teachers teaching 39 individual subjects. 31 of them met expected growth, and 7 exceeded expected growth. Bear in mind that these are completely new tests, and they were based on the federal Common Core state standards, which was in effect all last year for statewide schools. We do not teach to the Common Core state standards. We feel they're unvalidated. It's a kind of we feel like we're experimenting with the kids if you use those standards. They're very non-traditional. And last year we used our regular classical traditional curricula as specified and agreed to in our original charter application, and we're continuing to improve that, and that's what we'll keep doing. It looks like we're able to score well on the Common Core state standard tests anyway. So, but again, all that preliminary. The final answers will be out later in November after the state board approves them.
November the 7th.
November 7th is the
When
state board.
when should our trustees get the final result?
If they approve them on the 7th and then release them, and they'll trickle down to us, get posted on the website and that sort of thing. Probably, when's our next meeting? Later in November. Do we have one? It's Thanksgiving.
I don't think we have one. I think it's December.
It'll be, we certainly have it by the December meeting.
Okay.
And then those results will have comparisons to the other county schools, other than just the.
We'll know what the other county schools are doing.
Mhm.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Mitchell? Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 4 is just taken care of. Number 5, we have a report on the status of lawsuits involving New Hanover County Schools and Brunswick County Schools. And we have our attorney, Mr. Gary Shipman, here. Appreciate you coming, Gary.
Thank you,
Bring us
Chairman.
up there.
Mr. Chairman, yesterday,
Gary, excuse me, we got the camera being broadcast out. If you could maybe stand down at that end.
Take it right there, Gary. I'll move over here.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, yesterday I appeared in the North Carolina Court of Appeals with respect to the New Hanover County case. As you may remember, the court in New Hanover County entered judgment in favor of Charter Day School with respect to the monies that were due for the underfunding by New Hanover County for the periods from 2008 to 2010. The New Hanover County Schools appealed that judgment to the North Carolina Court of Appeals. Briefs were submitted by both parties months ago, and yesterday the Court of Appeals held oral arguments on that. The two principal issues in the New Hanover County case are the same issues that exist in the Brunswick County case, namely whether or not the county school board must allocate and pay to the charter schools the fund balance, a proportionate share of the fund balance. And then second, whether or not the inclusion of pre-K kids in the denominator. In the numerator is supposed to go all revenues and including the fund balance, and the denominator is supposed to go the number of public school students, and New Hanover County included pre-K students in their public, in their denominator, thereby diluting, we contend, the amounts that they otherwise were required to pay. Superior Court judge determined that they had to allocate and apportion all of the fund balance from year to year as that fund balance existed, and determined that they did not or should not have included pre-K students in the denominator. Those were the two issues that were argued yesterday in the Court of Appeals. I would expect within the next 90 days or so an opinion from the North Carolina Court of Appeals. From and after the North Carolina Court of Appeals, if there is a unanimous panel of the North Carolina Court of Appeals that unanimously affirms the decision of the trial court, then the only way that any further appellate debate could exist is if the North Carolina Supreme Court in their discretion decided to take the case. If there is, there's a 3-judge panel on the Court of Appeals. If one of the judges dissents from what the other two believe that could be the result, then whoever is the winner in the dissent, or the one whom the dissenting judge believes should prevail, could appeal to the North Carolina Supreme Court. Either one of those is statistically unlikely, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. But again, we expect to know something in the next 90 days. The litigation with Brunswick County is partially resolved, and what I mean by that is all of the same issues that were determined in our favor in the New Hanover County case were determined in our favor in the Brunswick County case, and now we're down to the point of doing the math. In New Hanover County, once the judge ruled on the substantive issues of you must include the fund balance and you cannot include pre-K, the judge in New Hanover County, the judge in Brunswick County ordered Brunswick County to produce certain information from which we could do the math based on what the correct math is. That's where we are. I would hope sometime in the next 60 days
that we will have a final judgment in Brunswick County. Depending upon what happens in the New Hanover County appeal, we may or may not be facing an appeal by Brunswick County back to the appellate courts. If the level of antagonism that I have read from Brunswick County is any indication as to what they may do, I would predict that we're probably heading to the North Carolina Court of Appeals on Brunswick County. But fortunately, or unfortunately as the case may be, by the time the Brunswick County case gets in the North Carolina Court of Appeals, we will have had a determination on the New Hanover County matter. And the same issues that exist in Brunswick County were argued yesterday in New Hanover County. If we prevail, if the Court of Appeals concludes that all of the fund balance has to be included and that they could not properly include pre-K, I hope Brunswick County will not continue to waste money on an appeal. The same law firm represents Brunswick County that represents New Hanover County. They are the same law firm that has represented all of the county boards of education for years. These issues are much more familiar to them than they have been for me for the last several years that I've been litigating it, but notwithstanding that, they have a right to go to the North Carolina Court of Appeals, and I predict that that's probably where we're heading with Brunswick County. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Is Brunswick or New Hanover offering any new information when they argue their cases?
No, the arguments that were made by counsel for New Hanover County yesterday are the identical arguments that they made before the trial court. So there was nothing new. I didn't hear anything yesterday that I had not heard several times before. And at least statistically, every judge that has heard the argument that was advanced yesterday in the Court of Appeals, at least in terms of our involvement, has rejected them. That doesn't mean the Court of Appeals won't adopt them. The Court of Appeals could. But if the Court of Appeals follows what they have already said about these issues, then they'll do what the trial court did.
And the decision to litigate for Brunswick County rests with the department, the Board of Education, or the county commissioners, or who makes that decision?
That's a really great question. I think the decision is being made by the insurance company and the lawyers. The difference between where you are versus where they are is that they're not paying for their lawyers. For some reason, the insurance company is paying for their lawyers. So it's not really costing the good citizens and residents of Brunswick County any money, but for the insurance premiums that they are paying, because I guess the only thing I can say is that I'm sure that the Board of Education will be bound or follow the recommendations of their lawyers, because it didn't really cost them anything. It's prolonging what they ultimately are going to have to pay, which from their perspective is probably good, that they get to prolong what they have to pay.
And they don't pay penalties or interest or?
Well, that will be an issue that will be the subject matter if there is an appeal by Brunswick County. We intend to take the issue of both interest and attorney fees up. We find it unconscionable that Brunswick County, New Hanover County can keep students' money, because the money does belong. It is the students' money. It is paid to the charter schools, but the money belongs to the students. We think it is unconscionable that they get to intentionally underfund the students at this charter school, and the legislature has granted them 3 years to pay it, and they don't have to pay any interest. We think that's wrong, and we've made our arguments on that. Those arguments have been rejected, especially because of the amounts of money that are involved with Brunswick County. It's a significant issue, and if they intend to appeal to the Court of Appeals, we intend to appeal the issue of the court denying us interest, because I believe that if the court in Brunswick County follows what the court in New Hanover County did, the court in Brunswick County is likely not to award us interest based upon the existing law or the law as argued by the school boards. We want to take a shot at having the Court of Appeals decide that issue, given that the case is going to go up anyway. And then the second issue is given that they've made a conscious decision to underfund us, is it unconscionable that they don't have to pay your attorney's fees for our having to get money that belong to the students, paid to the charter schools, and they're forcing us to do it. They know they have underfunded. There's no, they're not even apologetic about it.
Trustees, any more questions?
Thank you. I'll keep you informed.
Here's the statement.
As you expected me, Mr. Chairman, to be, that's the last thing you need me to do is be talking, right, Steve?
Not if you're on the meter.
Thank y'all.
Gary, thank you very
You're
much.
welcome. Y'all take care.
Very good report by Gary. He has bought into the charter school mantra of the fair play for the kids. It's become, when we first got him on board to litigate, he's been a standard Board of Education guy. He's been on the boards of UNCW and Cape Fear, and he was sort of hesitant. And the more he started looking at it, he said, it's outrageous. They are purposely underfunding you. They're taking money away from the kids. And he has done a jam-up job so far on that. Very good. Well, young lady, you are in the spotlight. We have Miss Phyllis Pearson of Petaway Mills and Pearson. She is our auditor. She is going to present the Charter Day School audit report and then follow that up with the Columbus Charter School audit. And we're into the nuts and bolts now, so relax and enjoy.
Steve, she's also going to present the RBA 401k plan audit.
That's not on my agenda. Okay. Well, you can do that.
Okay.
I'm gonna slide over here.
I just
Phyllis,
kind
why
of,
don't you sit? If you want to sit or stand, it's up to you. Make yourself at home.
I'm going to give you a kind of a background of our experience as a firm. Personally, I have about 30 years of auditing experience. My entire career has been in governments, school systems, nonprofits, homeowner associations, and real estate development, which is kind of an odd mix, and employee benefit plans. We have around 300 or so audit clients, 2,000 tax clients. So we have bring to the table a lot of tax experience with nonprofits, as well as the audit experience. All the staff has at least 80 hours of governmental CPE a year. The majority of them are either certified or becoming certified as CPAs. That is a requirement of our firm. We belong to the Government Audit Quality Center, which is an AICPA program that provides us with additional training, as well as the Employee Benefit Quality Center. So we've been auditing charter schools since they started in 1998. We're not allowed to have an advocacy position, but we do have a lot of experience and exposure. The firm audits 38 charter schools in North Carolina and one in South Carolina. The pension plan audit, the RBA 401k plan.
I got a couple of questions.
Sure.
Let me
Go right
interrupt you
ahead.
before you get into that.
Okay.
It's come up over the last 3 or 4 weeks. Are public charters required by law to keep the same financial records in the same way as, say, New Hanover County or Brunswick County or Columbus County? We don't do any funny money, so are we going through the same steps that they have to go through?
You are using the same accounting systems. Yours is an ISIS-based systems where, the public school that I audit uses a system called Sartex. They have exactly the same funds. The classification system's the same. The account numbers are the same. The one difference is that charter schools have more freedom outside of state statutes in the decisions they make for the children, where the public schools are bound by a restrictive set of laws about children activities. But the financial systems, if this kind of helps you understand, I can take my one-year accountant and move them across the jobs, and the understanding is exactly the same. Even if I move them from a public school to a charter school, they understand and can apply the same techniques. We use the same testing techniques.
Now, you mentioned, and I'm gonna let you get into it, because I've got
Okay.
some questions afterwards too. When you audit, RBA, charter day schools, Columbus Day schools, everything like, what is everything that you look at? What's your baseline that you start with?
Okay, we start by looking at financial information. The way we start that is we pull samples of disbursements, samples of receipts, samples of children's files, or in the case of the pension plan, samples of the employees' files. And what we're looking for is accuracy and allowable cost and compliance with what laws and regulations apply at that level. And we move from that to what's called account testing. That is a more detailed analysis where we verify the accuracy of account numbers, the balances. And while we're doing that, we're also, initially when we started the audits, we did an evaluation of the internal controls at this organization, at the third-party administrator for the pension plan, because you do use an outside services, and we did it at Acadia North
Phyllis,
Star.
let me back up one second. Say that again so I can understand it. You did.
Okay, and all right, we go in and we discuss what kind of checks and balances and controls are in place.
Okay, that's checks,
And-
and that's for everything regarding finances, money, the kids, everything.
Right. When we test, like an exceptional children's file, if we examine that, we test the internal controls that are in place, or the system of checks and balances and reviews over that file and how it's handled. And then we look at the supporting documentation to make sure it's been properly signed. The committee's reviewed it and signed off on it, and the parents have been involved in it. We are looking for all those things. We even check to see that the files are locked up, because that's the state law. So it's a lot of detailed testing in that part.
I'm sorry I pulled you off first, but you
That's
go back,
okay.
but I had those 3 questions or 4 questions in my head.
I'm going to do RBA 401k plan first. You should know that this audit is done to the specifications of the AICPA audit guide and the Department of Labor. And as such, it is a specialized audit, and some of the things that we would do that I'm going to talk about in another world would sound like that I'm giving a bad opinion, but I'm really not. We've issued an opinion on the statements. Well, we've not issued an opinion on the statements, is what I should say. We have disclaimed on the pension plan statements because we did not do testing of the investments in sufficient detail to render an opinion. The asset of the plan is $1.2 million in investments. That's the only assets of the plan. What would be involved if you were to really do what's called a full scope audit? You have to go to the bank, pull all the investment certificates and examine them and test them for pricing and things like that. And because of the DOL reached the conclusion that you could do one of these limited scope audits and issue the disclaimer on just the investments to simplify the process, because most of the banks that hold the investments are in New York. And so that's what this is about. We have tested the participant records, we tested contributions to the plans, the dividends that were earned, the appreciation in value, and the benefits paid to the participants. But the whole purpose of the audit of this is a DOL requirement. If the plan has 100 or more participants, it must be audited. And it's done to protect the interests of the employees. And we had no findings related to this audit. You're using a third-party administrator. that's very qualified, and they do all the record keeping, except for the initial payroll documentation when a person signs up. The staff here is responsible for seeing that the bank receives that information. So it's a small little audit. It took 120 hours to do the small little audit, so.
And Phyllis, did you mention what percentage of our employees are participating in the 401k?
It's probably, well, if you mean enrolled, okay, it's about 70%, I believe. That's not the same thing as the number who are eligible, and what creates and triggers the audit requirements is the number of participants who are eligible.
And so it looked like at day one, employees are eligible, is that correct?
Yes,
Right.
that's correct. That's the way the plan is written, and you're really auditing to compliance with that plan document.
Okay.
Any other questions for Phyllis on the RBA 401k plan? I got a question.
Sure.
How many total employees in RBA? If you got to have 100 are eligible to have it by the Department of Labor, go ahead.
Eligible can be people who are actively participating, people who are receiving benefits, and people who terminated. Okay,
There you go.
it's 117, I believe, is the correct number. It's close to that number.
But Steve, to answer there's approximately 200 employees that are involved in the 401k plan as far as, RBA, CDS, CCS, Douglas Academy.
Right,
So
right.
all those.
How many?
companies. Approximately 200.
200.
So that's been since my number, which was January 1, 2013.
Correct, because we
Correct,
have
yeah.
a new school year with more.
More people.
So 200 employees and 100, how many did you say? Or-
You can't
You can't
use
rely on
that
it.
math.
Because my number, the measurement date is January 1 of 2013 for a 13-year audit. You're behind. And the way you're growing, it's the wrong answer.
Okay.
Truthfully.
I can get you the actual numbers
Right,
as of
you're looking at
January.
2012.
I can get you the actual numbers as of December 31. How many employees as of that date and how many people participate.
Well, I'm trying to remember the 401k plan, because we had one and then we ended up changing it. That was a year ago or
We had a simple,
something
2 years ago, this is our second year with the 401k plan. We had a simple IRA
Right,
before that because we were under 100.
under 100.
But
And
once
then-
we hit the 100, then we had to go to a 401k plan.
Right. so it's-
Simple IRA limits the limits on the contributions for the employee are less than the 401k. So the 401k, in terms of providing a benefit to the employees, is a better, more flexible plan.
I guess the only thing I'm wondering about, since that change was made, are all of the employees completely aware about this opportunity, this benefit?
Yes.
Are we doing everything we can to make
Yes.
sure that they're taking advantage of this?
Well, we
opportunity?
send them, they have their open enrollment, we send the information out to them, tell them to sign up, and we send them information, encouraging them to take part in it because of the match. And,
And the match is available day one,
they won't.
they don't have to do it.
The match is available day one, but there is a vesting period.
Right, right.
Any other questions? Comments?
Yeah, that's right. They have to sign that they have to opt out. They have to sign that they're not gonna participate in it. So everybody knows exactly, when they're signing up, they have to actually sign. They can't just say,
Ignore
I
it.
didn't know about it. They have to sign saying, I'm not gonna do it.
Okay. And as far as you know, we have 100% representation of either opting out or opting in. Always accountable.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that's part of their enrollment packet.
Very good. Okay. Charter Day School, if you would be the next one.
And Emma, do we have to vote on each one of these individually to approve, or?
I actually was, that's a good point. I think I would do them individual, yes.
I move to approve the 401K audit as presented.
Second?
All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries on 401K. Very good point, Laura. Thank you.
Let me start by saying that the opinion, if you compared last year's audit report to this year's audit report, the thing that's very obvious is that the opinion letters are very different. In December of 2012, the profession adopted something called the Clarified Auditing Standards, and we are trying to write, as a profession, opinion letters that are more understandable rather than being in highly technical language. So I personally think that as a profession, we've done a much better job, but it would be interesting to have people's feedback. This is an unmodified audit opinion. We're using the word unmodified because unqualified was so confusing to people. But it's the highest level opinion that we give, and it is a clean audit opinion.
And we're on the Leland one, Phyllis, excuse me. Are we Leland?
Charter Day?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. We have tested the records, done projections, if you will, and then we've taken all the information we accumulate over a period of time in the audit and issued the opinion. We've also issued an opinion on the supplementary schedules that are required to be in the report, as well as on compliance with laws and regulations under government auditing standards, and then compliance and with laws and regulations that are in the state public school fund requirements that applies to charter schools. Those are all unqualified opinions. There's not findings or material weaknesses or significant deficiencies noted in the audit report, and so in that sense, there's a very well done year, and the reports are all unmodified.
What,
Put it in
how much is involved in like looking at the legal components?
Okay. What we do, okay, if I were to start with just to go down the compliance supplement, we have to look at allowable costs and allowable activities. What that means is we examine sampling of invoices, and we're looking to see if the things were appropriately spent, things that other charter schools would have spent. And there's a classification system the state has set up. We follow that to make sure that things are properly coded. We look at void checks to make sure that they were legitimate voids, because that's a way a system can be manipulated, if you will. We pull all the teachers' licenses, and we do a test of the percentage that are certified, percentage that are uncertified, to be sure that you meet what the Charter School Act specifies, because unlike public schools do not have that requirement, so we have to look at that. We have to look at the conflict of interest policy. Is it being applied properly? Is there a policy in place that's adequate? We look at the property and equipment records. There's requirements that you have in place a system for tracking equipment and things that can be lost over time because they're portable. So we test all that. We test something called period of availability. That means in North Carolina, you cannot charge June 30 expenses into the next July to balance your budget. You have to charge them in June 30. So we have to look at what happens in those 2 months and make sure that everything's in the correct reporting period. We look at procurement, and you cannot contract with a disbarred or suspended party. We're specifically looking for that. We're looking that this indebtedness clause that the state requires is in the contracts. We actually really truly read every contract that's entered into for compliance with the terms of that contract.
Geez, how many hours is involved in this?
That's what I was just thinking.
A charter school audit runs around 130 hours.
And who pays that fee? How is that?
It's paid by the school.
So it comes off of the bottom line of what we get
That's
from the county, from the
Mhm.
state, from the federal government, the dollars that come to
That's
the
correct.
children. So it comes as an operating
And-
expense.
That's right, and it's a highly competitive market, so, while we're spending 130 hours on it, the fees tend to be lower than that. But that's just the school market in general is like that, and that doesn't matter where you're practicing, which area. We also test insurance coverage for compliance with the state laws. We test to see that you're operating as an exempt organization because the IRS in North Carolina require that, and if you are violating the terms of the bylaws that you were formed under, that is a real problem because you could result in the loss of your tax exemption. If that happens, any income you've received from the state of North Carolina is really an invalid payment because they don't pay to, you get reclassified as a for-profit organization and they don't make payments for that type of service to for-profit organizations. So that's really problematic.
Yeah.
And we look at, are the reports that go into the state, are they adequate? Are you only using the specified chart of accounts? Do you only have one set of books that's required? Do you have a budget in place? Are you following that? There's not a requirement to have a budget, but it's a best practice. And we like to see that you have adopted a balanced budget and you really have an operating mechanism you're going to apply throughout the year. That's the compliance piece of the audit. In addition to that, we do the internal control test, the account analysis, and some statistical trend information, if you will, so that we can analytically see whether something is not functioning the way it should based on our historical involvement with other entities, if you will, because that is, if there's big spikes in trends, it almost always means there's fraud going on. And the trends here are very straightforward. Over from, I think we've got about 10 years of information accumulated, and it's the only time you see changes is when there's an increase in the number of children, which is the way it should work.
You mentioned you audited about 38 schools. How would you compare the audits of these two schools to the ones that you audited?
This, can I say in the top 5? Okay. Size is a big driving factor. Maturity, you obviously an inexperienced school is not going to function at the level an experienced school is. And then board involvement is critical. And we also think parents who buy into the education process for the children are very helpful to the growth of the school.
Sorry, got you
That's
on.
okay.
You trained her.
Yeah, let's go to page 17. The pretty part that Mark Dudek writes is his explanation of our financial statements. The total assets were $1.9 million. You have $1.7 million in cash. So in that sense, that's a very good indicator of financial stability. You've got cash that will cover future obligations that, you know, that's not typical of what we see.
What's more typical, would you say?
Less than a million.
Less than $1 million.
It's, a lot of schools have a tough time operating because they're just not large enough. The number of students drives some of these numbers. You know, if you're able to have long periods of large enrollment, greater than 250 students, growth happens financially. Accounts payables, $186,000. That's the trade payables that were owed at the end of the year. That's a normal part of the process. You always have invoices that come in June that the checks get written in July. And that's what that number is. You will note in the statements there's no debt. That is, again, an indicator of financial stability. That there's little debt, or that if you have debt, principal and interest payments are being made timely. The unrestricted net position or fund balance is $1.6 million. So that is also a positive number. On page 18, it costs $6.9 million to operate the school. Most of that, as in all non-profit type organizations, goes to salaries and fringe benefits for the teaching staff and their assistants. you receive $230,000 in federal funds, and as at all school systems, that number from the federal government continues to decline because the funds are no longer available. And if I could, what that affects most is the exceptional children, because the teachers were largely funded with federal dollars, and now that's rolling back into the state dollars. You had $6.8 million in other revenues. 4.6 of that was the fees that the state pay, and 2.1 million was the county appropriations. And that led to a change in net assets of $149,000. Page 19, it has the same numbers as the previous balance sheet. Again, the $1.6 million unassigned fund balances, the effect of that is that gives the school some discretionary money, should they need some. And then page 20 is the accounting for the governmental funds, and this school only has governmental funds. You had $7 million in general, state, public school, and federal grants. You spent 6.8, so on the fund basis, it increased $224,000. The difference is compensated absences, and the change in the compensated absences and depreciation expense. This statement does not show those two things, where the previous statement did. And that's a nuance, if you will, to governmental accounting. And then if we look at this, the federal and state funds, the expenditures on page 45, overall, $4.9 million was received from the state and federal agencies, and that number you're required to have audited and present in this, what's called the Schedule of Expenditures of Federal and State Awards.
Do you look at this on a basis like a per student? Like when you look at
We
these
do some
monies?
analysis work, analytical work on the basis of the number of students. It's like we know from the experience, if a new school doesn't get its enrollment up to 250 in about 4 years, that school can't survive. And we have, we can see as we've dealt with ones that went out of business, that's why they couldn't get their
They
enrollment
just
up.
didn't have enough money to
Right.
cover what they had to fix in variable expenses.
That's right, and a lot of them were trying to run transportation programs and food services for less than that number of students, for like 65 students, and they had really little chance of surviving.
Do you have any idea how this compares to, say, Brunswick County schools?
No, I don't. The public school system I audit is further in the eastern part, in the northeast. The cost per student that's being reimbursed by the state is pretty much close to the same number as a charter school in that area gets. What's hurting the public schools in some areas is the loss of students, if you will, because they're not just leaving for charter schools, they're leaving. They're not coming back, and relocations have gone on in a lot of areas, and that's not having a good effect on the financial piece.
Phyllis,
Yeah.
just on Charter Day School, if you could sum it up in 5 words or less, how good does that audit look?
But it's a clean opinion, and that's what you're really looking for, is the unmodified clean opinion. And there's no findings, significant deficiencies, or things of that nature in the report. No non-compliance matters.
Thank you, ma'am. Before I let you run past it, any other comments, questions? Carry on.
Okay. Well, Charter Day, I'm sorry, Columbus Charter.
Before we proceed, should we approve?
Yes, we should, thank you again.
Okay, I make
Lawyer
a
Bob?
motion that we approve the Charter Day School audit.
We have a motion and a second by Brianna. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Again, with Columbus Charter, there are modified audit opinions. There's no findings, there's no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, no non-compliance matters. So it's the same outcome. In page 17, the cash is $742,000. The total assets, 885. There's 142,000 in capital assets, being equipment to run the classrooms. $145,000 in accounts payable, and you can see how, while this is a smaller school, that's a similar number to Charter Day. And it's again, it's the payments happening in July of June expenditures. And $597,000 in unrestricted net position. Yes, sir.
I was just gonna say, the 742 that you mentioned, it's advisable for us to try to see that get up to
And
million,
it-
but based on the time of the school, or how long the school's been in effect, you're okay with that?
I'm okay with that, but this school has not been in existence as long, so it hasn't had the ability to build the fund balance, if you will. So the key is to keep the enrollment growing.
So Phyllis, this number here was pretty comparable to CDS the same year.
At the same point in maturity?
Right.
Right. Mhm. On page 18, Columbus spent 4.9 million, 149,000 in state, in the federal funds. The county appropriations were 834,000. The state appropriations 4.2 million. There's miscellaneous revenue of 92,000, and it had a change in net position of 355,000. If you were to have, you know, like a comparison of several years for Columbus, you would see that this change in net position has grown over time. Okay, and that's really the way you want to run the school. And page 19, the unassigned fund balance, which is our critical number, is $597,000, and otherwise the statement is the same as the other statement. Page 20 is accounting for the governmental funds of $5.2 million. Total expenditures $4.9 million. The excess or deficient was $340,000. Notice that how much it grew its fund balance in that 1 year. It grew from 256 to 597,000, and it's because the enrollment increased. And then the federal and state expenditures were $4.3 million. It's what triggers the single audit requirements, which is what the compliance testing is about.
You're on page right now?
45.
45.
I'm sorry, I jumped ahead.
We don't do this every day.
So, again, we had a good audit report, and Charter Day and Columbus both have had a history of good audit reports. I have not always been involved with the schools, but since I came and started working with them, I don't believe there's been any findings. I could be wrong about that, but I don't remember any significant findings.
We talked a few years ago about, building our surplus
Right.
of three, I think your suggestion was 3 months of operating budget.
3
How are we
months?
doing against that?
Three months of operating budget at Columbus would be about $1.2 million. So we're not quite there yet. 3 months of operating budget at Charter would be $1.7 million, so we're
Just right,
We're right
right
just
there.
slightly under that.
Do you think, given the landscape and the environment we're in, that 3 months is enough, or is your recommendation?
I think 3 months is enough. What you don't have that might be a concern, and hopefully the insurance and FEMA would step in, is you are located in hurricane zones, and those storms could be catastrophic in some sense, if, you know, but you're heavily insured, which is appropriate. And then there's always going to be some sort of federal aid in that situation. So you might have an emergency contingency goal as well as building the fund balance.
So we would be eligible for FEMA and over charter?
you would be eligible to apply. Whether it would be approved is a different
Right.
matter.
Okay.
Because they don't tend to approve businesses. And technically you're a business.
So you are suggesting additional emergency?
Well, I think you really should have a contingency plan in place, given your location.
In
Because
other words, relocating until we're able to rebuild, or is that what you mean by emergency?
that's exactly
plan?
an emergency plan. What would you do in the worst case scenario? Because it's an infrequent event, but you really should have a contingency plan in place.
In my workshop, your bar, we can get a
Okay. We'll divide and conquer. I'll take the elementary, you take the middle school.
Oh my. Woo, made me blush on that one. Whoa. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Trustees, are there any questions? I've got a few. I don't know if anybody else has any. This is something that is just, I've got to ask. As we all in this room know, Mr. Mitchell owns the Roger Bacon Academy Management Company. Do you audit all of the funds paid to RBA to make sure that they're in compliance and accord with our contract as charter day schools with RBA?
Yes, we do. We have to, it's discussed in the financial statements, and we have to be able to have examined underlying evidence to support the numbers in the financial statements. So that is one of our specialized set of work papers and has been forever related to this organization. Those same numbers have to be disclosed to the IRS, and we prepare those tax returns, and we do have to sign that they're complete and accurate. So,
So if they're not,
there's
you're,
some liability
Yeah.
there.
you're on the hook too.
That's correct.
Now, I've had this asked on one or two occasions, and I'm going to throw you a hard ball here. Did the schools reimburse Mr. Mitchell either directly or indirectly for any expense he claimed were on behalf of the schools? I already know the answer, but I'm just asking if we've got it. And what was the total amount of the reimbursements? Would you know that?
Okay, we're asking about Roger Bacon Academy expenses.
Right.
No, he did not.
Okay. Good.
Teacher salaries, benefits are a critical factor for this board to make sure that we're paying similarly to other teachers. You do other charter schools and other public schools. How do we fare in terms of teacher salaries and benefits?
Most schools do not have retirement plans as such that would allow teachers to invest in their own future. Some are in the state plan, some simply have nothing. Some provide very limited health insurance, and you're not doing that. Salary-wise, you're comparable to the state, to other entities in the state.
And the one-time bonus that we give to our
Is unusual.
awards based on the school's performance is
I
is
think you're the
unusual.
only school doing where we see that in any quantity.
And financially using that's a,
As long as you can continue to grow your fund balance, that's fine. I would not recommend you do that should you have an operating loss, during the year.
Trustees, any other questions or comments?
I just have one more question.
Sure.
There's a lot in the media about how much charter schools get versus the public schools, on a percentage, because we
Per student?
per student, so we don't pay for transportation and food and that type of thing. Approximately, what is the difference? Do you have an idea, percentage-wise, of how much charter schools get versus the county schools per student?
I really don't know, looking that question up, I'm sorry.
Well, let me direct that to Mr. Dudak. Can you give us an answer?
I cannot.
Okay.
Give us just, if we could research it and get back with you, I'm sure we can find out the answer to that question.
Okay, that would be good, I think, for all parents to know. you know,
That would be
how much
very
they're-
helpful.
Cause given the number of variable factors that would go into that number, it's a bit difficult to do it off the top of your head. Okay?
Thank you. Sure.
Well, my favorite Olive, good job.
Well, thank you. Well, great job to you and your
Good
staff.
job.
Steve, we need a vote.
Yeah.
I am, but I'm just so glad to finish that last one. Okay, the chair needs a motion, please, to accept the Columbus Charter School 2012-2013 audit report.
Oh, go ahead.
You can second, but it's her baby. Go ahead.
That's right.
I motion to accept the Columbus Charter School audit for 2012-2013.
We need a second. We have a second. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Now again, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
We really appreciate
Yes,
it.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Okay. That out of the way, we're moving right ahead. You sit right up here with me.
Okay.
We got a couple of things under new business. Ms. Bolton and I have been talking about both of these, and if it's not too much on you, Miss Lori, I'd like for you to sort of give us your thoughts on how we need to move forward. And this is something that the board's going to ultimately come to a vote on. If you want to make it in the form of a motion today, we will certainly entertain a motion. But we want to have an open policy for all parents, all students, all interested personnel coming to our board meetings. We want to give the parents an opportunity to speak. We want to be the listening entity. One of the things I think, and I'm just throwing this out to you, one of the things I think we need to do when we institute whatever motion that the board decides to do, that we have the headmasters and their lieutenants in the room as staff, so that if we need help because we're not there day to day, we can come up with an answer, formulate a policy, turn it over to staff, say, come back to the board with a recommendation. Then when we decide on what we do with the recommendation, we can get it back to the parents going forward, and then it completes the circle. Everybody's in the picture. And I think that, more than anything, will help the parents, the teachers, the staff in a full circle. Now, I just said everything I wasn't supposed to say. Go ahead.
I agree with all of that. The meetings have always been open.
Sure.
We've never had closed meetings. I think the question is how much had we communicated the dates and times and made sure that it was as communicated well as possibly. So I think, this is the beginning of that, but we can certainly do a better job of submitting in advance an annual calendar so that all parents, all media, all, citizens of our community are aware of the meetings so that they can attend those and know when they are. In terms of public comment, I've heard that the Board of Education meetings in the counties are held, obviously open. Parents are invited to come at the beginning of the meeting. The clipboard's positioned, so anybody that would like to speak signs the clipboard. The clipboard then is taken up when the meeting is begun. A certain amount of time is given per parent or speaker at the end of the meeting to address the board. And it is, as you said, a one-way dialogue. It's not a one-way monologue. It's the parent or the person speaking to the board, and then the board responding that we will take that into consideration and then follow up with you. So it doesn't turn into a debate or
Sure.
anything other than
Sure.
just a forum for a parent or concerned citizen to discuss. So that, I think, just kind of puts this in perspective. They've always been open meetings, but we could certainly do a better job of communicating they're open, and we would like to invite parents and citizens to attend.
I agree, Todd.
Yeah, sure.
I agree, Todd. Do you want to work that into a motion? It might be a little loose here, but
I will try. I move to continue to provide open meetings. With the opportunity for parents and
Citizens' public comment.
all citizens to address the board about questions, concerns, comments
Absolutely.
regarding the schools, and respond to specific inquiries.
I think what we would want on the motion, and we can fine tune this, but I think what we want to do is make sure that in the motion we have staff in the room so that staff hears the concerns of the citizens and the parents, not just the board. I think the key players, the headmasters, their lieutenants need to be in the room so that when a parent addresses it, it's still, as you said, it's a monologue, it's a one-way, but it gives us the opportunity to deal with staff at a later date, say, come back with a policy, they don't like this, what can we do? And then we can set the parameters on what we want to do. I don't know if I don't know if that's, I'd hate to be the secretary trying to put this one down in the minutes.
We want to enhance our open communications, and one of the means to do that, one of the means that we use to do that is having the headmaster and possibly somebody else from the schools actually be here, so that any parents or citizens who have things that they want to talk about, they can hear it directly.
So we got those two things in it.
I was trying to paraphrase.
As far as the actual procedure and what we want to do it, we've got the general basis for the motion. I'm good with that. We'll craft that a little bit better. But I like the idea of the sign-up sheet. I like the idea of dressing and saying, okay, we've got, whether it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, we'll allocate you 2 minutes to have your monologue with staff there. And that's very general, and we will fine-tooth it a little bit, so to speak, so that we can get it, so that it's an actual working board where the parents have input with staff and interaction with the board. That's the best I can do.
Okay.
All in favor? I need a motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, good. All in favor?
Aye.
Good, thank you. Laura, appreciate it. You're on again, Laura.
Okay, and then the second thing we talked about was, the board is composed of members of the community that may or may not have students here at the school, and we thought it would be in the best interest of the board to get to know some of these students and their perspective about their experience here at the school and what it means to them, and how much they enjoy, attending the school. So we talked about doing a student presentation spotlight of inviting either an elementary school, middle school student from one of the 3 campuses to come lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, the school pledge, and then speak for a couple of minutes about their experience at the school and what it's meant to them to have this choice to attend one of these schools.
I'll second that motion. That was excellent. That is jam. That, you can't do it any better than that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Before we get the ratification of actions taken,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Mitchell,
a question on the last, who selects the student to appear before the board?
that's a heck of a question. We haven't gotten there that far yet, Mr. Mitchell. We're working on that. We'll get back to you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Hate it when they hit you with a zinger. I would, honestly, I would say I would turn it over one time to the elementary headmaster and one time to the middle school headmaster and let it be their choice. and rotate it back and forth. I think that would takes us out of picking and choosing. It's their people and they know what's going on in there.
And rotate between the three campuses. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Get those kids out of Charlotte Day School at 11 o'clock and bring them on over here.
Who wouldn't want that?
I would have. Just a couple of comments from the chair. Dr. Lee Monroe resigned his position from our board to spend more time on something that was near and dear to his heart, Campella education. We have a letter of resignation, or I do someplace in here, that was dated October 9. And we're going to miss Dr. Monroe. He gave us a lot of good insight, and we wish him as a board and as a group of individuals all the very best in his new endeavors. Then a special thank you to a trustee that's sitting here for going up to Raleigh and having the courage and the fortitude to take the new charter training. That really, Brianna, that speaks well for your commitment to the students, to your commitment to this board, and for that we all are going to stand up and give you a round of applause.
It really was very interesting, and I think it would be beneficial, you know, for more members of the board to actually go and show their support.
Well, tell us a
for
little
new
bit about it.
charters. They basically went over everything from, you know, how do you go about getting a new charter? You know, everything from the rooms, the building, the land, the connectivity to the internet. It was very interesting. It was from 9 to 4:30, so it was a long meeting, but it really was interesting.
Will you drive? The vet?
It
If
wasn't
you'll
bad.
drive the vet, I'll go. Thank you.
Sure.
Oh, don't say that. We need a motion on the ratification of actions taken today and an approval. We need a motion, please.
So moved?
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you.